he is. And it's like, I get that the Borg have him, but I've also seen him overcome some amazing odds. And so, like to me, like that's kind of what
He was
I
stabbed
from
in the heart, for God's sakes.
exactly.
I mean, he
100%
was.
right.
He was. But that's a good point. Like, that's a good tie-in that Admiral Hanson's telling this story about this freshman cadet who won the marathon. And you're like, okay, what does that have to do with anything? And it's like, he's stronger than you think he is. And in that moment, yeah, it's a cheesy moment with the CGI tear. But at the same time, they are telling us, the audience, Picard is still in there. And it ties in, and we'll talk about it next week when we review the episode Family, but it ties in to his recovery when he goes back home, and how that episode Family really is a trilogy with these 2 episodes, even though they weren't even going to do that, but they made it like a trilogy to complete Picard's story arc about his Borg assimilation. And I mean, this is a real violation of Picard. He was completely violated by the Borg. So yeah, I mean, it worked for me. The tier worked for me. I thought it was
schmaltzy.
It is schmaltzy, but it does tell you, the audience, don't count Picard out. He's still in there, right? So then Riker and Worf are in the Enterprise. They're headed to main engineering, and they're kind of talking about different ways that they could defeat the Borg. You know, Wesley's got an idea about a chip that could, you know, randomly change their settings.
Restore to factory setting.
Pretty much. And then Worf is like,
are they going to turn them off and turn them back on again?
Just have you tried turning it off and turning it back on again? You know, and then like Worf is like, the Borg don't have any honor. That's going to be our biggest advantage here. And
I just love Worf. He's just always like, honor. They don't have honor. We have honor. You know. For the honor of Grayskull. Oh, wait, sorry.
Wrong franchise, but yeah, same idea. So when they get to main engineering, Shelby and Geordi are working on restoring the shields, and, you know, they raise the shields, then they collapse, and blah, blah, blah. They do, which I thought was funny, they do name drop Barclay in this scene.
Oh, yeah.
That Lieutenant Barclay is working on something, and for those that don't know, Lieutenant Barclay is a recurring character played by Dwight Schultz, a great character actor who was in the A-Team, probably where most people know him from. He played Howling Mad Murdoch.
Yeah, I didn't realize that he was in that until I was looking him up at some point in time.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's why he looks familiar. Like, for some, I just didn't.
But he's also done a lot of voiceover work. If you ever watched the cartoon Chowder, he did voices on that cartoon as well.
He did?
Yeah, he did.
Oh.
He was Mung, the chef that Chowder worked for.
Really?
There you go. There's your factoid of the day.
Okay, so I have to say, if there's any Downton fans out there, Barclay and Molesley are like 2 of a kind. I feel like
they are. I agree. Yeah, Barclay is like
the
future's version of Molesley.
So, but for the probably few people out there that are fans of both, look at it. It works. Anyway.
It is. I agree. He's definitely Molesley. So Shelby and Riker have a conversation where she basically makes a case for her to be first officer. And, you know, Riker, again, kind of starts to criticize her for ambition. But then we kind of see a little character growth here, because he says, you know, you remind me of me. Captain Picard reminded me of that. I was just like you when I first came aboard. I had a lot to learn. You've still got a lot to learn. But I felt like this was an improvement on previous conversations that they've had. Janine, what do you think?
Yeah, I feel like this is some, like, grudging respect for her on Riker's part, is that he does see her potential. Picard reminded him of that, is that, you know, she's a lot like you when you first came on board as my first officer. And so And Riker, I feel, was humbled like the last episode. He felt very unsure of his own place in sort of Starfleet itself. And, now he's got the captain's chair that he didn't really want yet. And, he's got to make the captain's choices. And now he's thinking like a captain and not a first officer.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it's just, he has sort of, what am I trying to say? So, he's grown, but it's like he by doing this, by kind of okay, yes, and kind of reconsidering it, he shows that he recognizes that he was not, almost like that he recognizes to himself that that's why he was being so mean to her, is because he saw himself in her, and he didn't know how he felt about that, and then it's kind of he's kind of reconciling it with himself. If that
I totally agree. No, I feel like
a lot of words in that sentence that didn't really need to be there.
But I feel like this is the moment where he begins to understand. You're right. He begins to understand his relationship with her and why him and her butt heads so much, why they clash, why he finds some of her conduct distasteful, because it reminds him of himself. But this is the moment that he becomes mature enough to understand that. And I like to see character growth. And again, in the last episode, he was a first officer. Now he's a captain. And there's a lot more on his shoulders than there was before. So then Data calls down to main engineering to say that the fleet has engaged the Borg at Wolf 359. So Riker gets up to the bridge and he talks to Admiral Hansen on space Skype, and he's not doing so good. So one of the cute little things in this scene is behind Admiral Hansen, when he's on screen, you can see an old school red alert thing flashing. Stuff that you would see in Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan. So it made me think that the Admiral ship is probably an older ship. They may have even pulled it out of retirement. He may have had it pulled out of the decommissioned lot. Because when you're an Admiral, you can choose your own ship.
That's true.
And so I did enjoy that little thing in the background. But basically he tells Riker that the fleet has sustained heavy damage. They're going to regroup. But they get cut off. And so basically the fight's not going well for the Federation. So we get now Captain's Log, and this is Riker now speaking. Stardate 44002.3, which is Monday, June 6, 2366 at 3:45 in the morning, and the Enterprise is headed to Wolf 359. So in the observation lounge, Riker has basically his senior staff there, and he tells everybody, Worf and Data, who are really in line for promotion, he tells them, listen, I don't want to start changing where everybody is, so everybody's going to stay where they are. I need you at your posts. And so he says that he grudgingly promotes Shelby to first officer. And it's interesting because Data and Worf kind of look at each other like, oh, really? What a surprise. What a twist.
This felt a little bit like Mr. Darcy declaring his love for Elizabeth Bennet. Oh. He's like, the first time he does tell her that he loves her, he's like, I begrudgingly, against my better judgment, love you. And it's like, oh, thank you, I guess.
Yeah. So, even though you're dirt poor and a terrible person and your family are all idiots, I guess I love you. Wow, thanks a lot, bro.
I feel so loved.
After he promotes Shelby, they kind of talk about some options for what they could do to fight the Borg. They do drop a reference here to something that happened in a previous episode. They do talk about nanite. And so for those that don't know, that is from season 3, episode 1, a show episode called Evolution, guest starring Ken Jenkins, who you probably remember from Scrubs. Mm-hmm. He played the cardiologist, right?
He was some doctor.
Yeah.
He actually helped start our Actors Theater here in the town I live in.
Really? I had no clue. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's super cool.
With my ridiculous history tidbits.
That's super interesting though. That's nice.
Yeah. So if you ever make it to Louisville, I go to the Actors Theater of Louisville. He's acted there.
Nice. What was his character's name?
Bob Kelso.
There you go, Dr. Kelso. That's what we put. Unfortunately, none of the options.
You were asking what his name was on here.
Oh, Siri, what is his name? So, unfortunately, none of their options will be ready in time because they have to confront the Borg now. Like, they don't have a year, 2 years to figure stuff out. So then Riker goes into the ready room, and you can tell that he does not want to sit in that chair. Mm-hmm. He's not ready for it because he's having like an identity crisis about losing Picard and all that.
The ghost of Picard is like in that chair. Like,
pretty much.
Like, oh, I can't. Oh, I don't, no.
Do you think it smells like Earl Grey tea?
Probably does. The whole room probably smells like Earl Grey tea. It's what he always drank. But I like that Riker asks the chair, what would you do? And then Guinan comes in.
Of Picard, he's asking, not the chair.
There you go. You're right. He's asking the ghost of Picard, what would you do? So then Guinan comes in, and she's kind of talking to him about what's going on in 10 Forward. She's saying people are basically like convinced that they're going to die tomorrow and that no one can save them. And even though that they trust and like Riker, they don't think that anyone can really help them. So she says something really interesting. She says, when a man is convinced he's going to die tomorrow, he'll find a way to make it happen. And she's telling Riker, you have to turn this around. And then she tells him that he has to let go of Picard, even though it's something he does not want to do. And she says, it would have been easier if Picard just died, but he didn't just die. The Borg took him away from us piece by piece. Then she kind of goes a tiny bit into her relationship with Picard. They've always kept it very secretive, but she asks Riker if Picard ever told him why they were close, and he's like, no. And she says that their relationship goes beyond friendship. It goes beyond family. And she says, and I will let him go. And you have to do the same. And I felt like this was probably one of the most important scenes in this episode because it really speaks to Riker, again, having to have a character moment of changing how he thought and how he felt about Picard. And, Riker is just stuck on this because he's like, but, Picard wrote the book on this ship. And she's like, well, then it's time to throw the book away and start again because everything that he knows, the Borg know, and it's the only way that you can beat him. And she tells him, and that chair is now yours, Captain.
But does it have lumbar support?
I was thinking she should have also said, it goes beyond time, about how they met.
That's true. That's for a future episode, though. I do like that after she
past because remember we're recording.
Oh, that's true. Even though the episode airs, it's timey-wimey. Even though the episode airs in the future, the events have already happened.
Right.
Because that's how time travel works. I will say that I do like after she leaves, he finally does sit in the chair for like a minute, and then they call him to the bridge, and when he gets up, he does the Picard tug. He does the tug on the shirt, which I thought was very cute. So Enterprise arrives at Wolf 359, and basically there are a ton of starships just dead in the water, as they say. They're just floating in space. And what's interesting is that
a shark attack.
Yes.
There's chunks out of them and pieces flying, floating everywhere.
Yeah. And there's There's no life signs. Like this is just a decimation. Like the fleet has been destroyed, right?